This meeting is now being recorded.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Jeremy Malarski. I'm Policy Director for the Missouri Coalition of Children's Agencies. Today is March 6, 2019, and this is third in a series of open webinars for frequently asked questions about our medication certification system. I am today going to probably spend a little bit of time on email troubleshooting and more on class management than the past two sessions. To kind of go over some housekeeping, this video will be uploaded to our manuals and guides page for your viewing pleasure at anytime you'll be able to watch it. We upload our videos to YouTube. We have a number of them, and they are there for your resources. So this is on my screen right now. You should see our main web page. That is emcca.org or emeca.org. That none of our actual testing or class management stuff runs here. This is just our organization's website that we maintain. And there is a section here on medication certification. There's one, it's under resources here on the right side, and there's one page that goes over just what MedCert is and the actual rule and regulation that authorizes us to do this and that makes it necessary. Basically, the view from 50,000 feet is that residential treatment centers and other centers where children are cared for on a long-term basis obviously will need to dispense medication to children, and this system is meant to certify those individuals to train and certify those individuals to be able to do that. So you need to have in the state of Missouri, if you're caring for children and dispensing medication and you're not a relative or other kind of custodian, particularly if you're in a residential treatment center, you need to either be a licensed nurse in the state of Missouri or have a certification from us or have a certification from another authorized state contractor. At this time, I do not know of another state contractor whose curriculum caters to children, to the dispensing of medication to children. The Department of Mental Health has a program where you can get certified. Theirs, is my understanding, is oriented toward the dispensing of medication to folks who have disabilities, and they have a different reg that they're actually authorized, and that one specifically mentions patients with disabilities. Our regulation mentions children. That said, if you have a little bit of trivia, if you have a DMH MedCert certificate, that is adequate for inspection. So regularly, the Missouri Department of Social Services will inspect residential treatment centers. They will want to see that the staff authorized to dispense medication is certified, and either a MECA facilitated certificate or a DMH facilitated certificate will be adequate for that purpose. There may be other agencies that I personally am not aware of, but they have to be authorized by the state of Missouri under Missouri rules and regulations. So this page here, the main medication certification program, kind of explains that and cites the rule. And then the page that I talk about quite a bit is the one linked to below it, the manuals and guides page. This is where we've done quite a bit of work in the last about year and a half since we launched a new web platform to try and get as much knowledge about the web platform out. You'll see there's a section here of videos. All of these link to videos that are hosted on YouTube. And then I have about 4 different printer-friendly tutorials for your use. Below this are all the appendices to the actual main MedCert manual. So usually when I am helping people with MedCert, I'm talking about the web interface and our manuals that help you with the web interface. There is a separate manual called the MedCert manual that only exists in print. that goes over the class, the purpose of the class, and the materials of the class. Your organization should have a copy of that MedCert manual, perhaps even multiple copies. This section here on the website are the appendices to that main MedCert manual. And probably the most commonly used appendix is this one, attachment 3. It's the form you fill out when you need to register a new nurse instructor with us. So maybe you have a nurse instructor leave and you have a new one come on board. You would fill out this form and send it to Mecca to register the new nurse and to let us know that the old nurse is leaving. Now, in the last couple months, we actually launched an online form for that purpose. So you can click the second link here below attachment 3, and you can get to an online form that may save you a little bit of time. So that's that. All right, so probably the most commonly used guide on this page is the General Overview and Class Creation Guide. It gets you started. It walks you through the process of creating a class. It answers a lot of questions and does a little bit of an overview. The part I want to kind of call your attention to is page 3. Starting on page 3 is a listing of all of the websites in our system by organization. We do separate those out. And your organization should have its own website here, and that will be the place you go to manage your classes. And for initial students, which we'll get into in a second, for them to that this is also the website where they would go to once they're enrolled in a class to test. So the way the websites are all structured in terms of the URL, that's the web address. There is basically the organization name. So instead of www, there's the organization code .lmscheckout.com. All the websites end in .lmscheckout.com. LMS Checkout, if you're curious, is the name of our IT vendor that created the software for the class management. There's a separate IT vendor that manages the software for testing. But the thing you most interact with is the class management software. The testing software is something you're kind of redirected to, and you almost never would go directly there. This site, this LMS checkout site, will redirect you there redirect your students rather there to test. You don't. If you need to go there, it's located at certification.emecca.org. But again, you will almost never need to go there. I can't think of a reason why, on the top of my head, why nurse instructors or students would need to directly in their browser type in certification.emecca.org and go there. You would almost always go from this site and be redirected from this site. So this is your web browser, and I'm using Google Chrome today. This is the location bar, and this is where you would type your URL. I'm going to use 2 sites today. I'm going to use our actual sandbox development site, mecca.lmscheckout.com, and I'm also going to use a site that has since been shut down because that actually has some students in it that I can kind of show you some of the concepts in today's lesson. All right. So the one of the more common issues in MedCert. Excuse me, I just had to make sure this is still running. One of the most common issues in MedCert is email management and email troubleshooting. Every MedCert runs on user accounts, and every user, both students and nurse instructors and administrators like me, have a login with a username and password. The username is always your email address. We don't have regular usernames like back in the 90s or the 2000s. Your username is your email address, and your password is, at least at first, is generated by the system. This is to keep things secure, but in the real world, we do occasionally run into issues with that. But anyway, you go to your site to log in. You go to your site, and here in the top right-hand corner is the login button. And it asks you for your username and your password, and there's a login button. There's also a link down here for forgot password. covered this a couple times, but if you, again, if you need to set or reset a password, such as if suppose you have a student who hasn't logged in a while, doesn't remember his or her password, or sometimes we have students who had an account created a while back and they need to reset their password, or there's a system glitch which occasionally happens where a student account or a nurse instructor account is created, but for whatever reason the computer does not send an email to that person to instruct them how to set a password. In all those cases, the solution 90% of the time is to go to this page, to go to the forgot password page, and simply type in your email address and click submit. 90% of the time, that will allow you to set a password and access the site. You have to access the site if you're a nurse instructor. If two reasons: you're a nurse instructor wanting to manage classes or do a variety of other tasks on the site, or if you are an initial student or a lap student who needs to test. Renewal students do not need to test. So I'll spend a second on that for those who are new or maybe haven't used our system in a while. We have two tracks of students. One is our initial students. They are people who either don't have, for whatever reason, they don't have a current certification. They haven't been certified before, or they were certified, 14 months passed, and they were not able to renew. Those are on the initial track. Those students must take an 8-hour class facilitated by you, the nurse instructor. They must access this system. They must log into LMS Checkout and pass an online exam. They have 3 attempts to do that. In one of those attempts, they have to have a score of 80 or above. If you have students that fail more than 3 times, we can give them 4 or more chances, but unfortunately, that does result in a second charge. Renewal students are the other track. Renewal students only have to take a 2 to 3 hour class, and I missed a step. Excuse me. Both tracks, both initial students and renewal students, must demonstrate competency. So, going back to the initial students, they pass the online exam, then they demonstrate competencies to you, the nurse instructor, and you attest to the fact that they did so, and they are effectively certified on the date you do that. Renewal students simply attend the 3-hour class, demonstrate competencies, and they are renewed for another 14 months once you attest that they have done so. Okay, so for initial students, due to the fact that, again, this runs on email addresses, and email addresses are your username, and you have to log in with your email address, it is extremely important that email addresses be spelled correctly, and that the email accounts for each student be valid, and that they can receive messages. A fairly, I don't know if it's a regular issue, I don't know if it's a common issue, but a regular issue that's happened to us a couple times is a student account is created because the student has just been hired, and unfortunately that student's email account has not been set up, and that can cause problems because the computer will attempt to email that student or send an email message to that student, and there's no valid email because they haven't been set up yet. So you want to make sure email addresses are spelled right and that they can actually receive messages. Once you log in as a nurse administrator, you will sometimes see this screen. This is the splash screen that students see. You want to click in the top right-hand corner here for the admin panel in order to start managing classes. Sometimes after you log in or to the admin panel, you will come to this screen which lists all the courses on your site. It's not really useful. In most cases, there are really one of 2 places that you're going to go into on the site. One is Manage Courses, Live Classes, and the other is Report Certifications. So we'll go to Manage Courses, Live Classes for a moment, and it'll actually show your classes at this point. There's 2 displays under Live Classes. One is the active classes, and one is the archive. To toggle between those, you'll use this link that is located on the top left of the display screen. So there's kind of 3 sections here. There's the blue navigation bar, the main navigation bar here on the top. There's the black navigation bar on the left. and then there's the stuff that's displayed. This is the display section. All right. Once again, manage courses, live classes, display section. Here on the top left is a link to this view archive, and this is to toggle between what LMS Checkout calls active classes versus archive classes. Like any web browser, you have a little bit of control over how this is displayed. You'll notice there's a scroll bar here to my right that I can use to scroll up and down. And there's also my zoom controls. I can zoom out using Control minus or zoom in using Control plus. Sometimes nurse instructors are unable to see parts of the screen because it's zoomed out too much, or they may not be able to scroll real well. So again, my solution to that is to zoom out so you can see everything. Or if you want to use a scroll bar. It's probably worth noting at this time that LMS Checkout does not easily support mobile devices. We strongly recommend you use a desktop computer for this system. Desktop computer with a browser. Mobile devices such as phones and tablets tend to be less effective with LMS Checkout. Okay, so I just want to show, I'm going to go to my archive classes. Here on the top header row is a place where you can sort things. So I can sort by class name, class ID, location. Most commonly, you want to sort by the date because you want to see your classes in chronological order. So I do that twice, and I have the most recent class displayed to me. As we'll talk about later, there's a couple places on the site where you'll see a record and you'll want to expand the record. We expand records in LMS Checkout by clicking this plus sign next to on the left side of the row, and it'll give you a number of things to configure. Probably the two most important. There's kind of three important things here. One is the cost. The cost it helps us. It's one way that we can tell whether it's an initial class or a renewal class. It should be 20 if it's an initial class. Excuse me, 20 if it's a renewal class, and 40 if it is a initial class. When you're creating the class, another way you can help us out is here in the class ID, which was formerly I think the session title. It's now called class ID. You want to name this something that tells us what kind of class it is. Initial or renewal, or new or renewal. That really helps us figure out what kind of class it was and how to invoice your organization. Second most important thing on this page is a signed certificate has to be set to Mecca Certificate Final. This is what enables you to generate printer-friendly certificates that you can email to the students, and also printouts that you have on file and can show an inspector when they come to your site. And then the third most important thing about this class display is here in the bottom left corner is the class roster. That's where most of the action happens for classes. That'll be in the bottom right. Again, scroll around or zoom out if you don't see it. Class roster looks like this. This is a good place to make sure your email addresses are spelled right. Also notice, again, you'll want to kind of scroll around to see everything. You can manage your student roster by using add users. And this is, by the way, one part of the interface where mobile devices fail the most is with the add user screen. I've yet to find a nurse instructor who's been able to actually add users to a class with a phone. For whatever reason, these controls don't work well on phones. So, okay, let's take a moment to kind of go over this. Here in the left window, it displays every single user on the site. Here in the right window is basically kind of the queue for users that you have selected and may add to the class. You'll want to look at available capacity because you can't add more students than this number. But in another part of the form, you can change that number if you need to. I think in the MedCert manual, the actual MedCert manual proper, it recommends that you don't have more than 15 students to a class. We also, it's probably worth noting, that we also do not support having mixed classes. So if you have some students that need to be renewed, some students that need to go through the process entirely, then you will need to have those in 2 separate classes, please. Okay, so you can, when I want to add people to a class, I can highlight their names here and click add. And if I made a mistake, I can click here and click remove. This is a good way. When you do this, by the way, you will want to make sure that you're right before you click enroll users, because click enroll users, you can't undo that. If you need to cancel students from a class, you have to call Mecca. So do make sure that the right students are being added to the class and that they've confirmed and they're going to show up. This is also, class roster is also where you certify students. To certify a student, you click the checkbox under competency completed and click save changes. This is really, really important, because if you don't check off on competencies, MECA staff cannot check off on competencies for you. We cannot assume, we cannot assume that a student has been certified by you. We need if you don't check this box and click save, the only other way we can mark a student certified is if you have some kind of documentation on your end that shows that you certified the student. We prefer a signed affidavit. It is that important. Only licensed nurses can certify MedCert aides according to Missouri law. So MECA staff doesn't have the power to do that. Please do not forget to check off on competencies for students that have completed the process. Lots of problems have happened that way. Okay, so again, you want to so making sure a student's emails are spelled right in the class roster is a good step. You also can check student emails in users and groups and users, and by searching for the student. Here's one thing that I passed along to a nurse instructor earlier this week, and this is kind of a drop-dead last resort. If your student is not getting emails from the system, if you're and maybe the student's email is broken, maybe there's some glitch, and you really need that student to test that day. And this will only work if one student is testing at one time at one computer. You can, as a nurse instructor, you do have the power here in users and groups and users and finding the user. You do have the power to log in as that student. So let's suppose we're having a real bad day. Barry Odom here is not getting emails to set his password. Barry cannot, for whatever reason, receive emails from the system. Maybe Barry doesn't have an email, and we don't have time to create one for him, and we really need to get going. We really need Barry to test right now, and only Barry to test right now on my computer. As I can log in as a nurse instructor, I can click login as, and log in as Barry. And when students log into the system, if they've enrolled in if they are enrolled in a valid class in LMS checkout, if they've been added to the class roster, when they log in, they should see this. They should see they're logged in as Barry, and this first screen, they should see a launch button. Clicks the launch button, redirects him or her to certification.emeca.org. I shouldn't have done this on our sandbox site because our sandbox site isn't hooked up to the testing site, but it will. The sandbox site will show a link that says certification exam at this point. Okay. So that is one workaround for if you really are unable to have if a student is just unable to log into LMS checkout. You can log in as them. This will not work for obviously in group settings. You have to think of kind of real world considerations here. If you have a classroom full of 30 students, they all have their own computers. It would probably get unwieldy to use this method. But some organizations, I recently learned, they have students test one at a time. with the teacher, with the nurse instructor there at the nurse instructor's computer. If they cannot log in, you can log in as them in a pinch. Please do not do this as a matter of course. We want there to be some security in the system. We want the system to have integrity. But I do recognize a lot of you have classes on the weekends, and some of you only use the system maybe once or twice a year. And this is a workaround for that purpose. And I am out of time. It's now about 10:30 on my clock. I'll go ahead and end the webinar now. On a personal note, I will be transitioning. I will be taking a new full-time job at the end of this month. I will be working for Mecca on a part-time contract basis to support MedCert, but I will not be available 24/7 for support on MedCert after March 15th. I will try to get to you as quickly as I can, and I do thank you for your patience on that front. But I'm not completely going away, and I will. But please do feel free to use the manuals and guides page. You can also, in a real pinch, if I'm not able to help, you can write an email to help@envisiontel, ENVISIONTEL.com. That is the Envision Telehelp desk for LMS checkout. All right, thank you and have a great day.